would say is don't wait. So, I waited many years. Like I always wanted to start a business. I always knew that I could create something that did not exist, or I always had ideas like as I was working, if this was like this could have been different and things like that. So those are things. My 2 cents on that is, hey, if you really feel like you are made to do that, I mean, that is what you like, and don't wait too long to think, hey, how will I have money, or how will I actually do this. A lot of people who will jump in, and then raising money is easy, reaching out and finding customers is easy. People are going to find you if you actually create something valuable. So
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Bejoy Narayana. And Bejoy was originally born in India, went to military school there in India, and then also got a engineering degree, and then did some software engineering for Ford Motor Company. Started in India, and then ended up moving over to Detroit after Ford went over to IBM. Then after that, went to work for a startup business that used some of IBM's Watson technology for supply chain issues. In 2018, got a small contract with the Dallas Housing Authority to also help them apply some of that technology, and they were looking to increase the number of inspections they wanted to do. So realized that there was a bigger market and industry, and decided to focus more on that area, and that's a bit where Bejoy's at today. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast.
thank you, David.
So you're absolutely welcome. And I just gave a quick introduction to a much longer journey and condensed in the 30-second version of it. So let's go back a bit in time and tell us how your journey got started in India.
Okay. So I was born in India, and I massively benefited from public education in India, and then went to a military school there for my high school, and then went to an engineering school, and got my undergrad degree in engineering, and that landed me a job with a software company, and I ended up working as the offshore lead for Ford Motor Company for a couple of years, and then they brought me to the US in 2000, and then I ended up working for them for some time.
And just out of curiosity, and it will show my complete ignorance, but just as a question. So I was not aware, and again, it's my ignorance, that Ford had a big presence of in India as far as for vehicles or for software programming. So just out of curiosity, how did you get connected up with Ford, or how did you originally get going doing some work for India with Ford?
I was working with one of the software majors in India. That the name of the company is Satyam Computer Systems. So they were my employer. They were a large software company who was basically like Ford was outsourcing their software work to Indian majors at that time. So they had a large contract, and we had hundreds of people working for them. So I was leading a small team, and then I did well there, and they had some reasons to bring me onshore for managing that team or interacting closer with the customers and so on. So that was the reasoning there. So that's very typical. Like large corporations, they have hundreds of people working offshore, and then some of them end up coming to be with the customer and coordinate work with them.
Got it. No, and that makes sense. So you worked with them for a bit of time over there in India. Then they said, okay, you're doing a great job. We'd love to have you in the US facilities. They're continuing to run and manage things. So you move over to the US, continue to work on the software side for Ford. And then it sounds like, that there was an opportunity that came along with IBM. So how did you kind of get it or make that transition, or how did you find out and decide to make the jump from Ford to IBM?
So I didn't join directly to IBM. So I was in Dearborn Heights. That is the very first time that And we had seen snow, and it was an interesting transition to the US. So and I worked for many consulting, a couple of consulting companies. After that, I worked for Siemens for some time, and then an Axon, that is the name of another consulting company that is based out of UK. So I worked for them for some years, and then joined IBM. So I was on the consulting track. So and when I joined IBM, I was an associate partner for their global business services division. So that is the consulting division of IBM. And I had a focus on supply chain. So I was leading that practice at GBS in IBM. So that is when I decided to found the company, and then started on my entrepreneurial journey, you can say. So, and then it was not focused on public housing. I wasn't even aware that the public housing sector existed, or I knew it, but that was not where we started. I mean, we were generally taking the some Watson services, like Watson was a leading product for natural language processing and things like that. And we were trying to take those capabilities, those IT software capabilities, and apply it on the supply chain problem. So, that was a domain that I really knew well. And I knew that there were some really new capabilities emerging generally. And then I was taking that capability and applying it on the supply chain side. That was the basic thesis of the company, or that's what we were going to do. And then we had a contract with the Fortune 500 company that was in the food manufacturing space. So we were essentially creating a bot, like for them to answer supply chain questions. Hey, how many SKUs of this product we have in Chicago in this location? And it gives an answer easily. So that eliminates the need for training and for people to use a voice activated service to ask that question and then get the answer back, that sort of thing. So that's how we started the company. And then I had a meeting with the CEO of Dallas Housing Authority in October of 2018, and they had a major problem. So Dallas Housing Authority is a very large housing authority in the US, and they serve 9 counties. It's a very large area they serve. And they had a wait time of about 5 weeks for initial inspections of a house. What it means in practical terms is a landlord has to apply, get a contract approved, and so on. So the rent is all right, it's affordable for the family, and it's reasonable. And now he has to get an inspection then. So to get that inspection then, the landlord has to wait for about 5 weeks. So this, when you think about it in a tight rental market, this can create all kinds of problems, right? People they have to keep the house empty and forego revenues for that period of time. And while they're doing it, they might actually give it to someone else, to rent it to someone else. So when the inspector shows up, the house is again occupied by someone else. So that creates a vicious cycle. So he was genuinely concerned about it. Like, no, how do we? So he knew that we were a very small startup. So then, and that is not what we were doing at that time. So, but then he asked me, hey, can you solve this problem for me? This is my real problem now. And I kind of said yes. I mean, I had real good previous experience on work order optimization, and I knew what capabilities existed in the market that which we could bring to this problem. Like if you think about this, like no, he had 18 inspections, they were making trips, and they were coming back. It's like a well-known problem in the software business, called a traveling salesman problem. Like now, how do you actually send a traveling salesman to say, like, no, let 10 stops he has to make and bring him back in the most efficient way? So I mean, it's a variation of that. So we had some ideas about how we could do it, and then and we solved this problem in about 3 months, meaning their inspections became current. So that caught their attention. So attention of the CEO. So he was really interested in what we were doing, and then that the word got out. We were in the press for some time. So that kind of started the company. But we are not just focused on inspections now. Then once you are in an industry, you start learning the problems, and they were very generous with their time in explaining things to us and so on. So we understood there is really no marketplace that is connecting the renter and the agency, the housing assistance provider. It could be a housing authority, it could be a COC, it could be a non-profit, and the housing provider, a property manager, a realtor. So it's a very large market where a marketplace does not exist. Something similar to, let's say, Airbnb for guest rentals. So I realized that there is an opportunity to create that, like that does not exist now, and that would fundamentally change some of these problems that have lasted for about 50 years. I mean, there could be a software-based solution to that. So that got us all excited, and then we started exiting the contracts that we had, and then we started focusing on this, we raised money, and we started coding.
No, and that's it's interesting that you started out in one area. That area led to a customer client that had a completely different solution, and they're saying, "Hey, we'd like to apply the technology in this area." And you said, "Well, we haven't necessarily applied in that area, but it should work there." And you go out and do it, and then it works, and then it opens up a whole new opportunity is to apply the technology in the new area. In this case, it was housing inspections and how you can reduce the amount of time without really having to increase budgets and having to increase them or staff or anything else. And so now as you kind of figure out that area and you say, okay, here's an opportunity, we can we can solve this problem. And now if they have this problem here, we also have it's likely they have this same problem in other areas or other locations. And so how did you kind of continue to go about building a business to further solve that problem and to take advantage of that opportunity?
Yeah, so that's the crux of the issue, right? So let me also take one step back and then generally say a few things about this assisted rental market. So I think your audience would kind of have an interest in that. So in assisted rental market, we are taking public money and then assisting a family who otherwise might not have a house. No, they could be homeless or and we are spending that money. So there is a general consensus in the developed world that if you're going to spend public money to assist someone to find a house, then they should have some skin in the game, and meaning they should pay some amount of money towards. They should have a contribution towards rent and utilities. So, since we are talking about people with really lower income, so that's why the utilities are also an important factor. So someone might not actually have money to pay for gas or electricity and things like that. So so the idea is that let's make sure that if their income is, if they have no income, then they pay nothing. But if they have, let's say, $30,000, then about $9,000 is spent on paying for rent and utilities. Like let's provide the assistance in such a way that they pay 30%. Okay. Then at the same time, it's not an exact number, so they have defined a range. Like it's a fairly complicated calculation. So then then let's absolutely make sure that no one pays more than 40% of their regardless of all these nuances involved. Let's make sure that no one pays more than 40% of their income towards. In our example, let's absolutely make sure it's never more than 12,000. So they have to pay. This family has to pay something 9,000, 12,000 in that range. So meaning that you have to then estimate the utility costs, which is, it depends on whether it's a single family house, an independent house, or it's a multi-family house. Is it in the middle, or is it in the top floor? So this heating and cooling costs and all can vary significantly based on the type of construction and things like that. So we have to be able to estimate that. And then we have to get this income and then calculate this. So that is a hard problem, as like in every city, collecting this data and all that. So our idea, as I was telling you, Devin, was we would create a marketplace, right, where this would work for everyone. Meaning we don't need to know. Someone from West Virginia, a property manager, a landlord, or a realtor would come in, put his address in, and the software will tell them, okay, this is the maximum rent you can get here, or if you have this rent, you have this rent in mind, oh, this is viable, but this is not viable, and these are the people that you can rent to. So to create this marketplace, it's relatively easy to solve this problem for one agency, but it's a much harder to solve it for everyone together. That is the challenge. Like, you can go to Dallas or Austin and then tell them, okay, hey, what are your payment standards? What are your utility allowances? Like, that is an estimate of how much utilities will cost. You give it to us, and then we'll do all this. And then to create it for one agency is relatively easy. But to create it for the entire country, in our country, there are some places where this is based on the zip code, because they are in the city. In some places like New York, where it's a densely populated city, this could be based on the census tract code. And the large areas of the country, this could be based on the county, because it's not like one agency might cover a county which is very large, and so there are nuances there, which makes the data collection and creation of the software fairly complicated. So it took us some time to actually build it out so that it would work for everyone. So we can only go to market effectively when it's working for everyone, because then you can pool all the housing providers. They can work for any agency, so they have a big benefit. Like, if you're a property manager working with 9 agencies in the Northeast area, you don't need to deal with 9 different forms, 9 different case managers. You just go to bob.ai, and then you can get your rent adjustment done, or create a new contract for a new renter and so on. So you can just go to one place. But if only works for 3, then it is a difficult messaging problem that we have. These 3 it would work, but the other 6 it won't work. So that's harder to create. So we had a tough time for some period. We did have early adopters, like some housing authorities were extremely responsive. So they knew fully well.
Yeah, maybe, and just to dive in just a little bit, because I think that that they're very insightful, and also probably gets a bit into the weeds as to how you might go do all that. So as you're, it sounds like, if I were to maybe summarize just a bit, when you're looking at trying to break into the marketplace, some to a degree you had to figure out how to apply it to different applications, but you also didn't always have to reinvent the wheel, and then you could or use it across different areas, and there's commonalities. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, it is a good, it is a fair summary. Yes. So once you solve this problem from a programming point of view, everyone is the same. They all follow this 30% rule. They all follow this 40% rule. There are some configuration things that you can do. So then it creates instead of creating one local market where one housing authority or one continuum of care provider is working with a set of landlords, you've created a marketplace for the entire US, where any landlord anywhere can go and list their unit and find the right agency, the right program, and understand how much rent they can get. And that's a different, that's the creativity side of things. Like, that creates a market, a national market.
Very interesting and insightful how you went about creating the market, and how that occurred and took place. So, well, with that, now as we kind of catch up to a bit of where, now you've created the market, you guys are continuing to expand and to grow, and we've kind of reached the present point of your journey. Always love to ask 2 questions about the journey. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
So the worst business decision I've made is I named the company. It's a funny one. Like, I named the company Bootstrapper. It's an Afrikaans word. I just knew the word. I just picked it up as there is a bootstrapper.com domain available. So let's name the company that. And then none of our clients could spell it, or no, they had. I've been on calls where just spelling bootstrapper.com, my own name is difficult, and it takes 2 minutes to spell that, and then to say, the name of a company is Bootstrapper, and you have to go to bootstrapper.com and then register. That was a funny experience. So so I had to change it to something that, we work with people who are older and people who are may not have really good eyesight and things like that. And it's a critical thing for them. Like, they have to sign a document for them to be housed, and all that. So bob.ai is something everyone can remember. Like, it's not that hard, and it's. So I actually saw a need. Even it is important that people can easily download an app. Easily search for it. And you expect people in their 80s, or people, elderly and disabled people, by definition, right, to actually use our app to sign a document so that they can get in, or schedule an inspection, reschedule it, and things like that. So we ask people who did not grow up in this with computers and mobile phones, etc., to use this. And so yeah, so that, I mean, it was not a horrible decision, but it had an impact. So we had to go through the name change and all that.
Oh, and I think that, it is one where sometimes it's a fun or unique name, or you have something that, you think is catchy, and yet, you come to find out it's hard for people to spell, or they can't quite remember it, or it's not as catchy as you might have thought. And it's one of those where it can be simple, and, but then you have to go through the rebranding, you have to adjust it, you have to get different URLs and different logos and everything else. And so it definitely makes sense as you're going through to have, or where that's easy to stumble, but also where it makes sense that the rebranding and what you learn from it. So now, with the second question I always ask is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
So what I would say is, don't wait. So I waited many years. Like, I always wanted to start a business. I always knew that I could create something that did not exist, or I always had ideas, like, as I was working, if this was like this could have been different, and things like that. So those are things. My 2 cents on that is, hey, if you really feel like you are made to do that, I mean, that is what you like, and don't wait too long to think, hey, how will I have money, or how will I actually do this. A lot of people who will jump in, and then raising money is easy, like, reaching out and finding customers is easy. People are going to find you if you actually create something valuable. So along the way, without, like, you're going to get some kind of help that you did not anticipate. People reaching out to you, and if you really feel that you are made for it, then go ahead and start right away. Without, like, waiting to figure out every single step along the way. That kind of planning may not work, and kind of planning may actually not be necessary either.
No, and I think that that's definitely a great insight and a good takeaway. Well, as we wrap up the podcast, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, or find out more?
So they can come to bob.ai. Like, if you want to be a customer, if you want to be if you have properties that you want to rent to assisted rental programs, please list your unit. We look forward to that. And if you're an applicant, if you're looking for houses, come to bob.ai. And if you want to reach out to me personally, it's bejoy@bob.ai. So it's my first name, Bejoy, spelled as it is pronounced, and at bob.ai. And you can also connect me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, definitely a lot of great ways to connect up to you, find out more, and otherwise use your service if people are in need. So definitely encourage people to reach out and connect. Well, with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast, Bejoy. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Just go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to click subscribe, share, leave us a review, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome episodes. And last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, go to strategymeeting.com. There you can grab some time with us to chat. Thank you again, Bejoy, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you, Devin.